The government is trying to fix health care, and I think the fix is in. I think anybody reasonable would say, hey, Abe, before you try to fix health care, why don't you take a look at Medicare and Medicaid, because they're wildly out of control, right? Their combined budgets are $700 billion. Grab onto yourself. That's bigger than the defense budget. Our savings are supposed to come from cutting $17 billion for Medicaid in the next 5 years. That doesn't even count the fraud that nobody's paying attention to. You know, they always keep talking about the big bad insurers. They made a 2.2% profit. That's a pretty slim profit margin. And that's over the entire system, while Medicare and Medicaid have lost $60 billion in fraud. And that's what we know of. May I ask you what I think is a reasonable question, America? If you were serious about cleaning up the waste, wouldn't you, do that first before taking on another health care job? Wouldn't you, I don't know, at least appoint a head of the Medicare or Medicaid program? This president hasn't done that yet. Did you know that? Why didn't you know that? Why aren't people telling you this? Kevin Williamson, he is the deputy managing editor for the National Review. Kevin, stunning that I was thinking about this as a businessman. If I was going to take over a company and I was going to say, okay, I got to get all the way, I'm going to cut a lot of expenditure out there, I would at least have my own guy in there to evaluate how bad the situation is.
Yeah, there's nobody in charge, and I think you're absolutely right about that. They don't want to evaluate how bad the situation is. Nobody wants to know. It's a bad, bad story, Medicare and Medicaid. You know, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security are about half of the federal budget. I mean, it's a huge, huge group of programs. It's going to get bigger and bigger over time. And the amount of fraud, waste, abuse, I mean, just outright crime and theft going on in those programs is unreal. But what's almost as bad as that are the things that are done that are improper, but not actually, strictly speaking, illegal. I mean, there's all sorts of money that's shunted different ways.
Strictly
and
legal.
Well, you know, like when Joe Wilson got himself all bent out of shape when he said, you lied to President Obama about covering illegal aliens. He wasn't lying. In fact, Medicaid was found to be spending billions of dollars every year improperly covering illegal aliens, and they were doing that because they're empowered to spend money on illegals if it's an emergency condition, like if a woman goes into an emergency room to deliver a baby. So that was one example of that. But what they did was they took that example and just decided that pregnancy in general was an emergency condition. So they were using Medicaid to pay for everything from prenatal vitamins to postpartum.
See, I'm telling you, this is why I've said you cannot let any bill pass.
No.
You can't, because they get their foot in the door. And this is Cass Sunstein's speciality. Let me just tweak things just a little bit. He'll just open these things up and it's done.
Sure, the thing is, it doesn't matter what's actually in the bill. What matters is what happens in the administrative apparatus years and years after the fact.
Do you think that's why, you find abortion and everything else in these? Because then they can say, oh, you were going to cut all that out. They're expecting, that way it looks like they're being more reasonable, but it doesn't. What the average American doesn't seem to get, I think, and maybe the Republicans do get it, it doesn't matter. Once you pass this bill, it's over.
Yeah, well, every bureaucracy is statist, right? And once you create the bureaucracy, you're going to get statism out of it. I mean, there's not going to be a sort of libertarian bureaucracy out there. I mean, all that matters is that you get the program created, and then years down the road, you can shape it the way you want it to.
Let me switch gears here, because I've told you over and over again, America, that this guy's a magician. He's David Copperfield. Always watch the other hand. What have they been doing since we've been watching health care?
Oh, gosh, they've been sneaking all sorts of stuff into other sorts of pieces of legislation. We've increased the budget of the National Endowments for the Arts by a third, by several $billion. We've set aside $5.5 billion for community organizing and neighborhood stability groups, which means, of course, ACORN and groups of that sort. Even in the health care bill, we've got money set aside for veterinarians. So we'll be taking care of dogs' health care in the health care bill, too. We snuck through a hate crimes bill in the military defense policy. And what else have we done? We set aside a couple of million acres of land that you can't develop oil or energy resources on in the land use bill. So, and net neutrality rules stuck into the stimulus bill as well. So all sorts of stuff that has nothing to do with the legislation that it's actually supposed to be attached to has been enacted.
Net neutrality in stimulus or in health care?
I was in the stimulus bill. There were some net neutrality rules, as I recall. Yes.
Great.
Does it matter really, though?
And you know what? And they wonder why. And the Republicans wonder why we're upset as Americans. I mean, look, you've got, what is it, 53% of Americans, 55% of Americans don't want this. 80% of Americans like the health care they have. They can't guarantee that you're going to be able to keep your health care, and nobody believes that they can. 35% of Americans want this health care. 35. They're going to jam it down our throat whether we say no or not. I mean, when did we turn a path here to not even resembling America?
Yeah, well, it's you know, all this stuff is just sort of a sneaky way to get legislation done. I mean, they drop these enormous bills that are, you know, thousands and thousands of pages. No one has time to read them. All the promises about putting this stuff online and making it available for debate. And they were supposed to put, you know, all the health care debates up on C-SPAN, all that sort of stuff. None of it's happening. None of it's going to happen.
The odds that this thing passes, it's supposed to pass the House this Friday.
Yeah.
And then it goes to Harry Reid.
Right.
They think he's going to use the nuclear option. I think he will. He's losing in Nevada. Like Vegas, SEIU, Acorn, they threw it to Obama. They are the ones, and Vegas is the place where it changed for Hillary Clinton.
Well, what's going to happen actually probably is, I mean, you know, the nuclear option, you're talking about the reconciliation process, it's not just going to be health care. They're going to pack a whole bunch of other stuff into there, too. Everything from student loans, possibly to energy policy, and a number of other things. They're all going to go to this one big bill that will be done outside of the normal legislative process.
America?